I'd like to again officially welcome you to Child Trafficking 101. We are incredibly grateful for the partnership and for the presenters that we have today, who I would like to very briefly introduce on this last slide before I turn it over. I would love to say welcome to, and by the way, your emojis, you give a little hand clap or do whatever you'd like to do to welcome them to the stage. I have Dr. Denisha Carley. And Dr. Denisha Carley is the Program Director for Preventing and Addressing Child Trafficking, which is PACT, at CFPIC, facilitating a statewide model of cross-coordination to strengthen child welfare programs who serve young people at risk of or experiencing human trafficking. We also have Josie Feemster, who is a passionate human trafficking activist, renowned for her resilience and dedication to justice. With over a decade of experience, she has triumphed over adversity, dedicating her career to supporting survivors. With that, Dr. Carley, Josie, we are so grateful to have you here. Us CalTrin staff will be in the back listening and taking notes ourselves. And to participants, should you need us, you can send us a message. And with that, we want to say welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us, Jessica and the CalTrin team. What a warm welcome. I'm loving the emojis. I saw some sunglass dinner shade emojis, some hand claps, and a lot of hearts. So just thank you for this warm applause as we come into the space. I am presenting today from occupied Chochenyo and Muwekma lands, also known as Fairfield, California. I bring an experience living in communities that are made vulnerable to child trafficking and its impact within my own family. I work alongside survivors like Josie Amrahang, who you'll hear from later today, as a co-conspirator to end child trafficking and ensure that all children are free, safe, and loved on. I'll turn it over to Josie to introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to share a little bit about Human Trafficking 101. A little bit about me. I am someone with lived expertise, so I really bring that lens to the work that I do. Although I am a professional in this field, have been working in many different spaces, from direct services to government, to state government, to federal government, and now back in nonprofit. So I'm really happy to be here with you all. It is an honor to be able to share a little bit more about what human trafficking looks like. So we'll go ahead and get started, and you'll learn a little bit about me throughout this presentation as well. So let's just turn to our group agreements. Uh-oh.
And while Josie's pulling those up, I just also want to acknowledge Melissa Gomez,
Yes.
who's the Associate Director of Child and Family Policy Institute of California, and she'll be monitoring the chat box and anything else that we might need along the way, dropping links and things in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for the work that you do to support children, families, and youth across this great nation. Before we get into definitions, data, systems, I really want to start with this image and this message. Love others by loving yourself. This here is a art piece that was developed and created by one of the wonderful, amazing consultants with PACT, and you'll learn more about PACT consultants, but this was from Diana Cisneros, and we really just wanted to bring her along with us, and we have been wherever we go. But with this particular training, we know that human trafficking is hard work. It involves trauma, injustice, and real harm. It also requires compassion, awareness, and care for people that we serve and ourselves. And so when we are talking about trafficking, we're not just talking about the stories that you hear on the news or see in the movies. We're talking about real children, young people in our communities who many already have been connected to child welfare, schools, healthcare, juvenile justice systems. And so we just really want to encourage you to be present, be respectful, engage with us, as you can, and practice self-care. This training has been brought to you by PACT, Preventing and Addressing Child Trafficking, in partner, and also with CFPIC, the Child Family Policy Institute of California. And you'll learn a little bit more about us as we move through today's slide, but just wanted to ground us in this. So again, just remind yourself to be present and to take care of yourself as you need.
So well said. And as we ground, we're going to ground in setting our intentions as well for the day. So Resmaa Menakem is a somatic trained therapist and community activist who developed the practice-based model of somatic abolitionism. He brings us this quote: "Trauma decontextualized in a person looks like personality. Trauma decontextualized in a family looks like family traits. Trauma decontextualized in people looks like culture." And so it's our hope to recontextualize for you who the children and youth are that are experiencing child trafficking through their stories, through their words, through their wisdom, through their artwork, as Diana provided. We ask you not only to commit to the training agreements that Josie just shared, but also to set an intention to be fully present and connected today. These are some cultural somatic toys that are a set of practices developed by Resmaa to help regulate our nervous systems. Our nervous systems are conditioned to give alerts of danger when we experience harm, but also when we experience stress. As we regulate, we're able to sit and be present through discomfort, which is where growth is able to emerge. So I'll briefly demonstrate a few techniques that can be used at each step of this model. The invitation is for you to join in on the practice and use some of these toys as you experience any signs of stress during the presentation, as child trafficking is a heavy subject and it impacts all of us. So first, we start with grounding. So I invite you just to notice where your breath is at, as I notice where mine is. Grounding is about connecting with the earth, the indigenous lands that we are all on. As you notice your breath, feel your feet underneath you. If you're sitting, feel your seat underneath you. Feel that comfort, feel that support. On your next breath, see if you can track your breathing going all the way through your lungs, through your abdomen, through your hips, through your legs, through your feet, and through the roots and the soil that is underneath the concrete that you might be standing on. There's such a rich biodiversity of support and regulation that exists on this land. The next step is orienting. Orienting is making our senses aware of what's around us, and it invites in safety. It's a connection to our animal instincts to make sure that our environment is safe before we can truly breathe, rest, and reset. So take a moment to look all around you. As you ground, you breathe, you orient. I have colorful walls. I have a window. I know where the door is. Really paying attention to even all those exits. Your body needs to know that it's safe, that even though these are going to be hard topics, you are here now. The next step is movement. And movement can take many forms, right? Depending upon what you need. It's moving the energy through. Some of us might need to shake things off. You can hear my bracelets rattle as I shake. Some of us might need to rock when we hear something that's a little challenging to hear. Brings you back to that womb, that rocking, that comfort. And some of us might just need a self-hug, right? And that brings us into the last point of a practice is touch. Our touch tells our body where to send energy, where to send love, where to send release, where to send blood, where to send oxygen. So you might need to touch parts of you, just holding your hands together, sending the energy and keeping it in. And just reminding you that these are practices that allow you to be more present, more connected, and not disassociate and go away when you hear something hard today. Thank you for engaging.
Thank you for that. Now, next, we're going to turn it over to an amazing, amazing person who is going to read poetry today. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Amra, to share a little bit about yourself as well as starting your poem.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm so happy to join you here today as one of the PACT consultants and subject matter expert, a second generation Cambodian American from Oakland, California, and child of genocide survivors. I'm an advocate, consultant, and educator specializing and addressing sexual and labor exploitation. My educational background consists of a master's in social welfare from UCLA and a bachelor's in psychology. I also serve on the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking and partners with a multitude of sectors with local and international organizations. I share my story to uplift those who are still silent, either through fear and are oftentimes haven't recognized the exploitation they are in. This poem I wrote reflects on the missed opportunities of the adults around me throughout different systems as a youth, and why it is so detrimental to humanize every person you come into contact with, as healing, support, and solutions require all of us through collective change as a team and a tribe. This poem is called Open Your Eyes. I know there are things you may be going through yourself. Every day there's something new in your profession and personal life. I can't for certain say how this may affect your care and attention, the ability or lack to care and see the pain in someone else. This hurts far more than you know, to people you've dedicated your life to helping. Pain and suffering unimaginable, manifesting in its different ways that many are afraid to speak on, scared of retaliation, pre-existing distrust. The neglect I've seen from early in my years is inexcusable. I can only speak on this now because I've gotten older. Years of suffering to now I can say I'm a survivor. Along with that, I've grown skills in discerning what's best or just unprofessional. As kids, our lives and the direction of it is unfortunately in the hands of too many. Maybe you've played a role in this or been passive as you've witnessed your peers fail responsibilities, dignity, and lack of empathy. Too many that ignores the impact and power you have to steer lives in the right path. A rightful, positive path that helps protect and redirect us from pain and exploitation. Sexual exploitation was my experience, and at the time, I didn't have the words for it. The many times I walked into my high school health clinic or community health services, the many imbalanced interactions with the law, the assertion of power, so many times I caught something. Another STD. Was this not concerning, or was I not a concern of yours? What really was going on in your head? To not stop and think for a second. Something was not right with this. A young high school girl having sex since 12 years old, being used, chlamydia, gonorrhea, trichomania, urinary tract infection, miscarriage at age 15, and not once did you think that maybe this young girl isn't in control of her own body. Could it be, was it the color of my skin, the community that I lived in? Was this your expectations that I was destined for sexual degradation? I cried countless times. Maybe you didn't see the endless tears streaming from my face, past my cheeks, flooding the floor beneath me, but trust and believe. It's sad to say that I'm not the only one with this story. This is still going on, unfortunately, way too frequently than it should ever be. Please open your eyes, your heart a little bit wider, so you don't miss what the eyes may be blind to see, but what the heart and intuition would feel if you would just listen a little harder. Dig much deeper and feel for us. The next girl or boy, man or woman that enters your office, of which you are meant to help. Please don't neglect this role in your life. You all have the power to help lead the next child to live their best and figure this world out. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Amra, for that powerful poem. Thank you. And feel free to scan the QR code to visit our Reclamation Art Gallery with not only Amra's art pieces, but the other amazing Thriver leaders and their pieces.
Indeed. Thank you, Amra. Honorable Amra Heng, for reminding us all to open our eyes. We appreciate your words, your sharing, and just your strength in the ways that you've transformed your pain into purpose.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh no, just thank you for this space, and I'm really happy that I can continue to share my experience and the realities around that in support of this work. And just thank you in advance to everyone here, and have a great training.
Thanks, Amra. All right, so you all got a little snippet of what you're in store for today. If you weren't already aware, California is a central hub for child trafficking. The San Francisco Bay Area and Los Angeles are both within the top 10 cities across the country with the most reported cases of trafficking. System-involved youth, notably youth that are in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems, are at particularly high risk of exploitation. But please know that any child can experience trafficking. Today, our intentions are to provide you all with a baseline understanding of what child trafficking is, to recontextualize the cultural, environmental, and systemic elements that create risk within children, and how to respond once trafficking victims or survivors are identified in ways that are trauma-informed and builds a diverse network of providers and community around them. The session will also highlight resources and subject matter experts like Josie and Amra and so many others from the Child and Family Policy Institute's PACT program. So we've been throwing around this name PACT, right? So who are we? We are an entity within a nonprofit that is charged with preventing and addressing child trafficking. So PACT was originally founded in 2014 as a pilot program to aid counties in developing their system response protocols. It was embedded within our mission and vision early on for PACT to improve services to children and young people at risk of or experiencing sex or labor trafficking anywhere in California. Through additional funding in 2020 and the support of the Child Welfare Directors Association, PACT moved from working with 10 counties to becoming a statewide network. Currently, 48 out of the 58 California counties have child welfare coordinators that are working and learning together through PACT to build capacity to disrupt the pipelines that create child vulnerabilities that traffickers prey upon. How do we do this? I'm glad you asked. Through a collaborative model that Josie will share more about.
Yes. So after California shifted towards a child welfare centered response to exploitation, counties were given flexibility to build local solutions. And so that flexibility was important because it meant responses looked very different across the state. PACT was created to connect those efforts. So we started again as a 10 county pilot and grew to a 48 county network. And so again, 48 counties now are engaging and participating within PACT. And we have organized these counties into 4 regional cohorts. And each county has a coordinator and a multidisciplinary team working across child welfare, probation, behavioral health, education, law enforcement, and community providers, and survivor leader thrivers. This map shows the reach of PACT and the network across California, while each county builds response responses that fit their community. They are all connected through this shared learning, training, data, collaboration. PACT acts as the thread that ties all of the local practice into statewide progress, to strengthen prevention efforts and to build coordinated responses for youth impacted both by sexual exploitation and or labor trafficking. And so one county participant shared that PACT is the thread that weaves all of us together. Participation has helped them improve practice and grow local support program. It has also moved into as we move into Human Trafficking 101. It is important to know that this work is not happening in isolation in our state in California. It is part of a coordinated statewide effort focused on early identification, prevention, and better outcomes for young people and families. This, I know I talked a little bit about our PACT consultant network, and so we have a team of lived expertise who turn their personal experiences into knowledge that drives real system change. We know that insight, no data set or policy paper can replace those with lived expertise. It doesn't happen automatically. It requires intentional investment like training, mentorship, and safe spaces and equitable pay. At PACT, lived expertise consultants and some staff who have been able that have lived expertise of trafficking, child welfare systems, and direct advocacy really help shape everything that we do, from program design to evaluation, making services more relevant, safe, and effective. Their wisdom, the courage, the unique perspectives, the strengthening trainings, resources, and system change efforts across California play a key role in supporting and transforming county programs. I want to pause again just to lift up that we couldn't do this work without our team of consultants. They really help shape that program design. And so when you participate in a training, read a resource, or engage in a cohort meeting, lived expertise is embedded in that work. And so again, we cannot do this without our amazing team.
Indeed. So we have images from that Reclamation Art Gallery sprinkled throughout the presentation, and this is another one of them. The Reclamation Art Gallery, as Josie shared, was a part of a special project through PACT that's now freely available for anyone to host within their own communities. I believe Melissa already dropped a link in the chat, but this particular artist featured here is Angelica Zunica. She's a lived expert who walks participants through the phases of force, fraud, and coercion, which you'll learn more about shortly, that child trafficking victims encounter. You can see from her background that the area she's showing is rural. Maybe there's not a lot of foot traffic. It appears isolated. In California, we have so much diversity across every region, county, and city, and child trafficking can occur anywhere. It's a strength that child welfare in California is state funded and county administrated, because it allows us to be aware of what our individual communities need while still being unified under the state. But these same strengths can also be challenges when it causes us to silo ourselves and fragment our services. California children and children all over the United States and worldwide deserve diverse and culturally sustaining resources that help them heal and grow. And these should be accessible no matter where they live within our state. So building that capacity is what PACT strives for, and it's why we're all here today, to be a part of that solution. Do you feel oriented? Do we all know why we're here? Looks like we're ready to get into some content because it's participation time. So we have these Slido opportunities, which you can scan the QR code or visit slido.com and punch in that number. And we are asking everyone to participate. Given what's presented in the media and within our communities, what are some assumptions that the general public might make about child trafficking? That it doesn't happen in my community, that children put themselves in the position on purpose, right? It's their choice, that it won't happen here, that it only happens to them. So the othering that we see, that they choose it, that it's not common at all. So why even talk about it? That it only happens in foreign countries, that it only happens in poor communities, that kids are kidnapped, that the children are somehow to blame, the chains, that it's only sexual, it's only happening to teens. There's so much propaganda around it, that it doesn't happen within white communities. And it's happening, but people are turning the other way. Only girls, only foster youth, only broken homes, only children that are impoverished, right? These are some general assumptions. I love the participation.
Yes, it's still going. So,
It's still going. Yeah. But we see these general themes, right?
yeah,
Around it not being common, that it doesn't occur where we live.
yeah. Mm,
Oh, that was a powerful one.
this is good. If it hasn't touched my life, it doesn't matter.
Mm. Many people want to ignore, too hard to know about. Yeah, we said this is a heavy topic, right? But 217 people decided to come in to learn more about it today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for engaging in our Slidos, and you will see those Slidos throughout our presentation today. So we want to invite you to question your assumptions. I want you to notice the reaction on this slide. A lot of what you all said were there, right? And we already kind of lifted up some of those, if not more than what we have listed here today. For many people, trafficking brings up a very specific image, like kidnapping, chains, foreign countries, someone being held and locked in a room. And when cases do not look like that, they often get missed. Most trafficking in the US, especially involving youth, do not start with abduction, although that has been in some cases. Um, it's not often the normal. It often starts with unmet needs, grooming, manipulation, and you'll learn more about that as we move through today's slides. It hides in plain sight. It shows up in schools, group homes, malls, social media, workplaces, and sometimes within families or peer groups. Part of why trafficking continues is because myths and assumptions about what it looks like and who it affects is always part of it. So during this, we're going to reset some of those assumptions as we walk through what is human trafficking under the law, what are the main forms impacting youth, and what that actually looks like in real time for young people. Our goal is to help you recognize the indicators earlier and, hopefully to respond to reduce harm. So when we talk about human trafficking, human trafficking involving children, there are two main forms we can focus on. So the first is child sex trafficking. It involves any situation where a minor is induced to or forced to engage in commercial sex act in a commercial sex act. Under the law, if a child is involved in commercial sex, it is trafficking, even when there's no physical force, fraud happening or coercion. Even if a young person appears to agree or is receiving something in return. The second is labor trafficking, child labor trafficking. And this happens when a child is made to work through force, fraud, or coercion. It can include unpaid labor, unsafe working conditions, excessive work hours, but both forms rely on power and control, and both often involve grooming, manipulation, and unmet needs. It can happen, in many different spaces, businesses, online spaces, agriculture, again, within families and peer groups. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we move today, but I just wanted to lift this up here, as we know that we want you to question those assumptions, because it's inevitable if you don't know what you don't know. And so we're here today to just kind of break some of this down today.
Yes. So I love that Josie started providing those definitions, but we want to make sure that you have them readily available to read them for yourselves as well. So I want to back up a little bit and say how we got here, because 2000 is not that long ago. It's only 26 years, y'all. So before that, there's a couple things I want to uplift. So in the 1990s, there was a crucial shift that happened in the United States where survivors of commercial sexual exploitation, lifting up names like Rachel Lloyd of GEMS in New York, Benita Carter of Breaking Free in Minneapolis, and so many others, they led movements around survivor advocacy, service, and policy. It was through their activism and willingness to bring countless survivor stories through books, through documentaries, through their platforms to the forefront. And this prompted legislators to develop the TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. Before the TVPA, the Department of Justice leveraged the 13th Amendment to fight human trafficking cases. And I want to uplift that because the 13th Amendment bars slavery and involuntary servitude. Trafficking is modern day slavery. Yet prior to 2000, there were no formal laws in place to specifically support trafficking victims and survivors. The TVPA provided us with two central things. It defined trafficking and it established a three-pronged framework to fight against it. And that's through protection, through prevention, and through prosecution. Josie already gave these definitions, but I just want to re-highlight them here, that child trafficking is defined through two overlapping umbrellas, through sex and labor. Both involve recruiting, harboring, transporting, obtaining, or soliciting of a child. When it's commercial sexual exploitation, it's when that child is engaged in sexual acts of any kind. There's someone else benefiting from that. And in labor trafficking, it's when the child is subjected to involuntary servitude. As Josie said, force, fraud, and coercion, they must be proven in cases of labor trafficking and adult sex trafficking. But children in the United States cannot legally consent to sex. So as a minor, force, fraud, and coercion are implied. They don't have to be proven. So while the law separates the difference between sex and labor, it's important to understand that traffickers do not. This is a quote from one of our lived expert PACT consultants, Jess Torres. People often think there's a clear-cut experience of trafficking when a trafficker doesn't care how you make money or how they are extracting a profit. For example, a trafficker could have someone stripping, selling sex, panhandling, working a regular job, or stealing simultaneously. All of this speaks to what human trafficking is and the intersectionality of both labor and sex trafficking.
Thank you. Now I want to zoom in on the different forms of trafficking. We talked a little bit about sex trafficking already, right? So any sexual activity engaged for something of value. I kind of want to focus on labor trafficking and zoom in here, because oftentimes the labor trafficking is a form of trafficking that's often missed. When you hear of trafficking, we usually think about sexual exploitation of children and young people being exploited in that way. Labor trafficking happens when someone uses force, fraud, or coercion to make a child work. That control does not look that control doesn't always look violent. It often looks like threats or debt or opportunities, wages, controlling of housing, or fear of getting in trouble. You'll hear some stories about each of these scenarios of human trafficking, and it is very powerful to see the different ways that trafficking manifests for young people. And so when you think about legal or informal work setting, you think of agriculture, restaurants, hotels, retail, domestic work. And then when you think about forced criminality, labor trafficking by forced criminality, that is another form within this umbrella of human trafficking. And this oftentimes goes unmissed and undetected. And oftentimes, young people are criminalized for these behaviors that they're exhibiting. So peer recruitment, when they're recruiting other peers into human trafficking, if they're engaging in drug sales or cultivation, theft or fraud or gang activity, oftentimes they are criminalized for what is happening to them. And so when we move forward, through this presentation, but as you move forward through your work, ask some of these questions. Where is this work happening? Who's controlling the money? When it happens to a young person, what happens to a young person when they try to stop doing what they're doing? Those really can reveal some of the exploitation long before someone ever uses the word trafficking. Next is a really great piece, the AMP model, also known as Action, Means, and Purpose model. I mean, this really breaks down how trafficking is defined under the law and just kind of breaks it down a little further. It helps explain why some cases are identified quicker than and others are missed. It includes actions like recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining a child for work. So you have the action, the means, and the purpose. And so child labor trafficking, you have recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, obtaining. The means would be force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of labor or services. Same here for child sex trafficking. The only thing is soliciting and patronizing additional from the labor trafficking. Here you'll have the means of force, fraud, or coercion. And then you do not need to prove this in the court of law when it comes to human child sex trafficking. And so the purpose would be for the Commercial Sex Act. And so this is just a little breakdown of it even further. I know we're just kind of continuing to talk about it, but it's really important to see the different ways that people kind of identify what this looks like. And so again, when a minor is involved in a commercial sex act, proof of force, fraud, or coercion is not required under the law. It is, however, required in child labor trafficking. And so, again, understanding this will help you recognize trafficking early on and respond appropriately.
Yes, I commented in the chat, but I wanted you to know so many great tips, right? I love that Amra's poem is called Open Your Eyes. And so many of the responses in the first Slido were people's tendency to look away because it's too overwhelming. So when you open your eyes, knowing what to look for. And as we go through the presentation, knowing more of what to do once you've opened your eyes.
That's great.
So participation time again. So you guys know the jazz, scan the QR code, go on slido.com. But what industries are you most concerned by in your community in supporting youth? Yeah. Agriculture, truck stops, service industries, manufacturing. And this one is a word cloud. So as more people respond with the same answer, it will get bigger to show how large of a concern it is across the board. So agriculture is the top. Churches, truck stops, public restrooms, schools, manufacturing, retail, the service industries, online. It's really important. Manicure salons, gas stations. I see some are also dropping in the chat. Child protective services, isolated areas, police, shipping, any public place nowadays, television and entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
These are goodness. It seems like it's everywhere, right? That people are concerned in their communities. And we have a wide range of people coming from across the country here today. So thank you for lifting that up.
yeah. I feel like most, if not all of these were covered. So I'm
Yeah.
so impressed by this crew that we have here. As these are commonly reported venues and frequently overlapping industries, because as we heard from Jess Torres, right, it doesn't just happen in isolation as being sex or labor trafficking. So often they're co-occurring. So this Venn diagram just shows us a few of those. They were already named, right? Traditionally, we think of street-based prostitution, right? And that is still happening. So often folks are, maybe some of the assumptions might be that things have moved to be online or it's no longer in sight. But I can guarantee you, Josie and I, if we went to any city in this country, we could point out where the blade or the track or the area is where street-based prostitution is occurring or child trafficking is occurring. This was also uplifted, right? The escort delivery services, the truck stops online. Some of the areas where people tend to focus and see more labor trafficking. The top one that was listed on the Slido, right? Agriculture, construction was on there, hospitality, retail, they were all on there. I did not see traveling sales crews or begging and panhandling, so I want to make sure to uplift those. I remember in college being recruited to sell knives, and I don't know why I thought that would be an okay thing to do. But the types of things that, and we'll see some examples of that in our presentation, where being being recruited into these situations where you kind of go door to door and you're selling something and there's some kind of quota that you have to beat, and it's connected to your housing, your food. And then you have the areas where there is overlap that include the health and beauty industry, illicit massage, illicit activities. So the labor trafficking by forced criminality that Josie uplifted around drug sales, scams, theft. You have bars, strip clubs, pornography, and domestic work.
Yeah. I was just taking a look at the chat, and um, Dulce mentioned National City is a very big one, uh, on this. There's actually a police tower now on the outside of the motels. So we know that this is happening across California, across the nation. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you all for engaging in the chat as well.
Yes.
So what is force, fraud, or coercion? Force, let's take a look a little bit closer at the different core tactics that traffickers use to gain and maintain control. First is force. Force is what most people picture, right? So the physical restraint, assault, sexual violence, locking someone in, withholding food, drugging someone, clear physical harm. Force is real. It happens. and it's not the most common starting point. Next is fraud. Fraud looks like telling lies, false promises, promises of a job that does not exist, or promises of higher wages, false contracts, lies about the type of work or hours or living conditions. Fraud often pulls someone in before they even realize that they are being exploited. Um, and then you have coercion. Coercion is the most common and the most misunderstood tactic. It includes threats to loved ones, threats related to immigration status, taking documents, controlling housing, food, or transportation. It's gaslighting, manipulation. It's normalizing abuse. It's using someone's criminal history or fear of legal system leverage. Coercion works because it creates fear or dependency, and many youth are not physically restrained. They stay because they believe they have no safe alternative. Um, when you assess situations, think about, what is being threatened, what is being promised, what is being controlled. Trafficking is about power and control. And these tools are used to maintain their victims. And so, just a little bit deeper on what is coercion. Coercion is any scheme or plan or pattern intended to cause harm to a person to believe that failure to act would be a result in a serious harm or physical restraint. Threats of physical harm or physical restraint against any person, abuse or threatened abuse of legal process. So this slide really just gives that definition, but I really kind of want to, just share in plain language. Coercion is any pattern of behavior meant to make someone believe that if they don't comply with something, something bad will happen. And so that's in a nutshell what coercion means. You know, yeah, not just once, not just accidental, but these repeated threats, pressure, and control really includes, that physical harm and, abusing the legal system, threatening to call the police, threatening deportation, really using someone's fear to keep them trapped. One second. Oh no. Okay, there we go.
Oh, technology.
Mhm.
So I just want to uplift that we are at the halfway point. We will not be taking a break today, but we encourage you to take care of yourself as you need. So whether that's using some of those cultural somatic toys, just kind of breathe and shake and re-energize yourself, or getting up to use the restroom or water, please do so. So I love that we included this map because I saw that we have folks in the space from Michigan, Texas, Minnesota, Chicago. I can't remember all the different places, but this is a national map with a report card. So Shared Hope International is a leading nonprofit dedicated to bringing an end to sex trafficking through prevention, restoration, and justice. In 2011, they began grading states under the Protected Innocence Challenge on their strength of their laws and their responsive services that address child trafficking. So this color grid shows the grades for each state. And you can either scan the QR code, or I saw that Melissa also dropped the direct link in the chat if you want to read more detail about how your state measures up. As an overview though, in 2011, when the inaugural reports were released, our national grade was an F. We've come a long way since then, but we still have a long ways to go. So in short, we just want to uplift the importance of dismantling siloed systems and fragmented services and the disproportionate distribution of resources across rural, tribal, and urban areas. So this is a quote from another nationally acclaimed survivor leader advocate and dear friend of Josie and I, Miss Nola Brentley. She's played a large role in our state in particular since the early 2000s in really paving the way for survivor leaders and really ensuring that services are culturally enriching to young people and that we really understand the intergenerational impacts of what this all means. I noticed someone's comment in the chat about the impact of family molestation and family abuse and sexual abuse and those things that occur. And so we want to uplift those elements and make sure that we're understanding the historical lens of oppression. Similar to sex trafficking, it is necessary to understand labor trafficking through an intersectional lens of historical oppression. It began in the United States during colonization when indentured servitude and has continued throughout history with African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, Latinos, and immigrants forced into labor to build the country we have today. And even though this is a quote specifically focusing on the historical implications of labor trafficking, I just also uplift that NOLA's platform really looks at the intergenerational elements of sex trafficking as well, and how those early organizings around how folks were migrated to this country, enslaved in this country, and colonized played out into the elements that we see around familial sex abuse today.
Thank you. So traffickers can be anyone. And traffickers can be anyone, but most typically are someone that the child knows or the trafficker has close proximity or relationship with. And so trafficking does not follow one pattern. There are different ways exploitation happens, and understanding this helps with identification. First, you have familial trafficking. This is when a child is trafficked by someone in their own family or extended family. This can include parents, caregivers, relatives, foster parents, or step parents, aunts or uncles. Because there is already trust, authority, dependence. This form is often hidden the longest and is deeply misunderstood. Next is non-familial trafficking. This involves someone outside of the family who is intentionally builds a relationship with a child. This often starts with grooming, attention, gifts, emotional support, or promises of opportunity are used to build trust before the exploitation begins. Then we have buyer perpetrated trafficking. And in these situations, there is not a traditional trafficker controlling the child. Instead, the buyer directly exploits the youth by offering money, food, ride, shelter, and engaging in exchange for sexual acts. This is important because this often looks like the trafficker miss the exploitation when the buyer is primarily involved. And so then you have finally the gang controlled trafficking. And this involves organized gang members through a gang network, and they may use both sexual exploitation along with forced labor trafficking by forced criminality activity. And so some key takeaways here is that trafficking is about exploitation. It is not about the one type of offender. It can happen in families, relationships, peer groups, or organized networks. And knowing these patterns help you recognize trafficking even when it doesn't match common stereotypes. So I'm just going to note here that you're going to hear from a couple of different stories um, from the consultants on our team. What you will hear is not anything that's going to sit well with you. In fact, it shouldn't. It is going to be some hard content, difficult content to listen to. But I will note that we are all doing wonderfully in our lives. We have overcome those many things that were meant to destroy us. We have come out on the other side. And so just know that who you are going to hear from today are in much better places and live a life of love, hope, and joy. And so just wanted to make sure I name that ahead of time. But we'll go ahead and play the videos. Bear with us. This is going to be Russell's story.
So my first trafficker was my mother, who started selling me to the landlord. And the landlord was part of a pedophile ring. This all became very normal for me. When I reported it to my mom and she did nothing about it, I realized that nobody was going to ever do anything about this. So by the time I was 9 years old, my behavior became so difficult and just outrageous for my mother to deal with, and for schools and just in general. The emotional trauma of what I've been going through manifested in really extreme behavior problems. And so I ended up in foster homes, eventually into group homes, because even foster homes weren't well equipped to deal with a child like me. In group home, I was abused there by some of the older boys, and one of them in particular started pimping me in the streets. So I've been pimp trafficked, familial trafficked, and then by the time I was 18 and I was on the streets on my own and had no pimp, I was survival sex and having to do whatever I could to survive in that space. So young men and boys and grown men who have experienced this, we shut down and we do not talk about this. And we will overcompensate and become overly male, overly aggressive, overly violent, and really not disconnect from our emotions. Later on, when I was being trafficked on the streets, there were times when I would come to the emergency room. I had broken ribs and I'd been raped and by my trafficker because I didn't comply. I'm living on the streets. I'm dressed kind of dirty clothes. I obviously hadn't washed, and nobody asked, how did this happen to you? They just, saw me as one of those street kids, who is part of the problem of society. The difficulty for healthcare workers is really challenging. And you can't even really rely on just one red flag. Plenty of perfectly normal, healthy kids may exhibit one red flag. It's multiple red flags that then begin to start to trigger, like, we need to look deeper into this. I think ultimately what I'd like to leave people with is that if you don't know to look for something, you're never going to see it. So if you're not looking for boys as potential victims of trafficking, you're never going to find a boy. He could be sitting right in front of you. You're never going to even think about him being a possible victim of trafficking.
So those were a series of videos that we did in partnership with Dignity Health, also known as Common Spirit. And I know we don't have a question here afterwards, but just now kind of thinking of some of the pieces from Russell's story, and now jumping into recruitment methods, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Denisha Carley.
Yeah. And just uplifting a couple of the elements from the chat to be reflective of is
Yes.
how often, as Russ said, that this happens to boys and to men, but how often, as was uplifted in the chat, that they're not taking seriously around it, that we're not looking for that. just as it was uplifted before, these are hard conversations to have, and it looks differently, right, across genders and sexual experiences. And so being willing to know the signs, recognize the signs, and have those challenging conversations, right? I worked in a different state for a while, helping support survivors that were on the other side as perpetrators of sexual abuse, and really being able to see through that they also had similar stories around being abused themselves, right? So really looking at the person and being able to say those words and have those conversations. So just wanted to uplift that with Russ's
Yeah.
story.
And I mean, even with Russ's story, I think we had some of the myths early on. We were talking about, what are some of the things that, um, and someone mentioned men, that it doesn't happen to boys, it only happens to girls. And so I'm
Mhm.
glad that we started out with Russ's story. That way, it really dispels that myth right on early on.
Yeah, indeed. And yes, this training does go until 11:30 Pacific Standard Time, so we have 20 more minutes.
Okay.
But for those that do have to jump off at the top of the hour and transition, this recording will be available. And I'm also noting that for Josie and I'm like, oh, we have so many things that we want to share. So I'll do my due diligence in being both brief and making sure to still go through these concepts. But so many of these we've talked about in the previous slides, but we just kind of wanted to put that out there of what the recruitment methods can look like around that coercion, around that grooming elements, where it can be peer to peer, and oftentimes that is labor trafficking by forced criminality, right? That there's someone else that is forcing that connection to be made for their benefit, and that it can occur through postings like these. I've seen these in my own community, like want to make a quick buck, things that are appealing to youth, right? That there's no contract or deceptive contracts even that you have to sign, that there's no age requirement. And so often these, as we said before, things that are fraudulent of like modeling agencies and things like that. And sometimes they are real agencies, right? But then once you come into that, there's this whole other side of it. So just being aware of what you see in your community and educating the children in your lives, the children in your home. um, yeah, I could say so much more, but I think those are the main points that I want to leave you with. And this is a national study. So the other component we want to make sure to uplift is just how prevalent it is, right? One of the myths that we were debunking was that it's not common. It actually really is, unfortunately. So Covenant House conducted a national study. So this wasn't just California, but all across the country. And they interviewed 911 youth that were experiencing homelessness. And of those roughly 1,000 youth, almost all of them, 91%, reported to have been offered some kind of lucrative work opportunity that turned out to be trafficking, either labor or sex trafficking or both. And 1 in 5, that's very significant, identified as victims of some form of trafficking. So being aware of how common, being aware of the systems that make our youth vulnerable. So 23% of youth that were unhoused had a foster care history that were trafficked. And I've seen studies that say nationally up to 60% of youth that have experienced the child welfare system end up being recruited into trafficking. And then also the impact that this has on the LGBTB plus community as well. And so those are some of the demographics to be mindful of.
Here's a quote from Jess again. Trafficking not only is not only about forced sex or labor, it exploits a young person's isolation, trauma, marginalization, and the need for belonging. Also, we wanted to just kind of lift up some of this here, some of the push-pull factors. California, and this is just specifically for California. We want to just share about the landscape and what drives human trafficking in our state. This really sets the stage of why collaboration matters, because the challenges we face require shared solution and coordinated systems. And so trafficking in California is not only happening because of one factor, it happens because there are many system overlaps. California is the most populous state in our country and one of the largest economies in the world. The industries like agriculture in the Central Valley, the entertainment industry in Hollywood, technology in Silicon Valley, service work across the state create opportunity, wealth, strong demand for labor trafficking. At the same time, California's major interstate freeways, ports, borders make movement easier. That movement allows exploitation to quickly travel quickly and remain hidden. During years of hotline response work, we often heard and saw from across the state that youth being moved from Central Valley to counties along the freeway corridors. And so, we just really want to lift up some of this, as we know that poverty and economic instability increase risk, and insecure immigration really just creates, fear and silence, and lack of housing is a huge piece. Trauma, abuse, systemic barriers limit access to resource and protection. These, pull factors are what traffickers use, as we talked about on previous slides. So they're really kind of relying on these factors here to exploit young people. Next is going to be Jimmy's story. And so I'll have to forward it, so bear with me, as it is a video done by CAST, Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking. Now, bear with me.
And while she's doing that, I do want to uplift the sensitive material that is connected to this. So there are reenactments. These are paid actors that are reenacting some of the incidents that happened to Jimmy. So making sure that, again, you're breathing, you're taking care of
I came here to the United States when I was 14 years old. I'm originally from Honduras. The gang members were looking for me to kill me because I didn't want to become a part of the life, so I had to run out of the country. I left my family, crossed borders, came over here. The first day, those guys that they call coyotes, they kidnapped me there and was locked up in a small room. I used to just cry, and if I do try to escape, they were gonna kill me. They brought me here to work in a furniture factory for 2 years. Regular people were working the regular hours. I was not allowed to talk to them. I used to work without being able to see the sunlight, not going out. And then one time I told the manager I couldn't work because I was feeling sick. They hit me with a stick of wood. I didn't get up, and he hit me again. They were treating me like an animal. And one day I just ran out. And I got into a small restaurant, and they asked me what's wrong. But the guy, they were chasing me behind, they were coming back for me. And then the guy got there, and he said he was my dad. And I told him that that's not true. This guy told him that if he doesn't leave the small restaurant, he's gonna call the police. And then he left. And then this guy, he told me, I'm gonna give you a job and you're gonna get paid. He just told me, oh, you're gonna have to drive this car to a mechanic shop, leave it there, and then bring another truck from there to over here. I did that for a month and a half. And then one of those days, the police stopped me and they started searching the truck. They found 2 pounds of cocaine. They put me handcuffs and put me on the police car. I was 16 years old at the time. They were going to help me if I'd say the truth. After that, they did investigation. Drugs in the restaurant, he got arrested. The factory was closed. That was a big case.
We provide legal services to survivors who have been trafficked in many different ways, both in terms.
All right. Thank you for that. Because of time, we're going to move past some of these Slidos and the content. We really want to get some of this out to you. So this next slide is just letting you know that how often exploitation starts with technology. 1 in 4 young people have been offered money or other goods of value for tech facilitated interaction. And this here was pulled over and surveyed by Thorn, and you can take a look at their website as they have more information around that.
Yeah, so we're gonna play this short video. We only have oh no, you're good. Well, we just want to prioritize some of these videos to allow you to see the diversity that can exist within trafficking.
Oh, Carter, you're on fire! No joke. And hey, have pity on the new guy. Not gonna happen. Oh, yeah!
Okay, pro gamer. Dinner time.
Gotta go, guys. Hey, it's Carter, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I go to your old school. Wanna join my chat and play some PvE later?
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, Dad. We have a new guy in our squad. His KDR is insane.
Huh.
Yo, I'm back.
Nice. Hey, I don't recognize you from school. Did you guys move?
Yeah, we're in Westlake now.
Cool. Well, if we're gonna team up, you can't be looking like a scrub. Here, take these credits and unlock the Dark Void skin.
No way. That's worth like $60. Thanks, bro. The squad is gonna be jealous.
Oh, my girlfriend's coming soon. Hey, are you with someone?
No.
Wow, Carter the loner has big evening plans with his parents.
Nah, my folks are busy. They let me do whatever.
Hey, I think I know a girl that'd be into you. Snap some pics and I'll show her. Wow, you're joking, right? Come on, show some skin. Go harder, bro. Show the girl what she wants to see.
Carter.
Nice, that's more like it. Kinda stupid, though. You know I'm showing these to your friends over at Westlake Middle School, right? Your life ends when I hit send.
What? Are you kidding? No!
Relax. As long as you do me a little favor, I can make sure nobody sees these pics again.
Honey, I'm worried about Carter. He's always online with that new friend.
Yeah, I know. I'll talk to him on the way to school tomorrow.
Good. Something doesn't feel right. It reminds me of an article I saw the other day about online predators. I'm gonna look it up.
Send me the link when you find it.
Causing someone under the age of 18 to engage in a commercial
So again, we have to skip the Slidos in the interest of time, but we really just want you to be paying attention to the different tactics
I was a
that
teen.
traffickers are using in each of these situations. And we specifically really wanted to show the occurrence within boys and male identified victims as well. So you heard from Russell, you heard from Jimmy, you heard from Carter, and now we're going to hear from survivor leader Josie.
I was a teen mom, and I grew up in a very dysfunctional home where drugs and alcohol were very common. No stability, no consistency. I grew up in poverty, so not having much. And then when I turned 18, that's when I actually got introduced to the dancing industry, which led me to the dark world of trafficking. And in my mind, I was like, I need to pay my bills, right? I need to take care of myself and my daughter. From there, it was like a scary dream that I couldn't wake up from. I didn't know how I was gonna make it out. It felt like people that bought and sold me were, and exploiters or pimps were the only people that I was like worth being around even. But it wasn't until I really recognized I needed to make some changes. The last time I went to prison, and I had a 16-month sentence, and I was really scared. And I knew that once I walked through those prison walls, it was like, this was it. I was gonna be dead or in jail for the rest of my life. I did not seek medical attention that often. When I would be physically abused or hurt in any way, I typically wouldn't go to the emergency room. I would go to Planned Parenthood to get condoms or to get checked for STDs, STIs. But had the medical professionals asked me the questions like, hey, what's going on here? There were clear red flags or warning signs, right? There were questions that, medical professionals did ask, but I was trained so well, right, by my trafficker not to answer the question. So what I would say for me, if someone,
would have kind of, again, talked to me a little bit more, gotten to know me, had an advocate in the room to ask me real questions. And I know you just have a short window, but, offering any resources if you even suspected. And just really trying to get to know me, letting me know that I mattered. People ask me the question of, if you could change something, what would it be from my journey? And honestly, I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for those experiences. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't be able to connect with other survivors and victims across this nation. I wouldn't be able to help people the way I do. I wouldn't be able to stand on stages and facilitate change across this nation if it wasn't for my experiences. I wouldn't have found my purpose if it wasn't for my pain.
Yeah.
I
She's
know
incredible.
we're
She's trying to glance over her. She's incredible. And just to uplift, feeling all of this love and all of the applause, and to uplift that across all of these stories and uplifted in the chat was the importance of professionals being trained to recognize the signs. So often in the public health, the survivors that spoke to, if I would have only been asked, right? If there would have been an advocate in the room, if someone would have paid attention to these bruises, these markings, these miscarriages, all of these elements that were showing that abuse is happening to my body. And the other element is this criminalization that happens of survivors through Josie's story, Russ's story, Jimmy's story, talking about how quickly it was to put them in jail around some of the forced criminality that was occurring. So just wanted to uplift those points.
Thank you. Yeah, no, for sure. We shared very impactful stories of what trafficking can look like in very different scenarios and experiences. Now I'm going to turn your attention to some of the potential indicators. You may have heard myself, Jimmy, Russell talk about some of these indicators. So work-related, excessive hours, withheld paid, untreated injuries or malnourishment, control and isolation. And so restricted movements, controlled money or documents, scripted responses, maybe some educational gaps, some safety concern, visible and physical abuse, ties to gangs, criminal activities. And then, just wanted to turn your attention to that. If you're seeing one sign, that doesn't necessarily prove that someone's being trafficked. If you're seeing multiple signs, that should trigger deeper questioning, potential safety planning. The key is to be curious and offer compassion. That is the key thing when you see any of these indicators. I am going to skip past Aisha's story. I do apologize. You will get all of this from us, but when due to time, we really want to push forward.
Indeed. So feel free to scan the QR code, or Melissa will drop it in the chat. But this is a quick 4 or 5 page document that is the child trafficking indicators chart. So the first couple pages give the definitions of child trafficking, how important early identification is in establishing a local response and connecting children and families to the support in their area. This is all free for you to use within your state, within your city, within your county. So please do. And what I really appreciate about it, we don't have time to scroll through and show everything, but the last couple pages of it provide just like an overview of a grid along social environmental indicators, behavioral indicators, physical health indicators, what it looks like for sex trafficking, what it looks like for labor trafficking, by labor trafficking for forced criminality. And so you can also see the intersectionality of all these domains.
Absolutely. And again, all of our materials and publications were developed and created in partnership with Lived Expertise. And so it's our team and the consultants and beyond. Just real quick, the traumatic experiences like trafficking and exploitation overwhelm a child's ability to cope and to stay safe. And so trauma doesn't just affect emotion, it really changes the brain. We won't get into it deeply here, but this is an image of a brain scan that shows a healthy brain versus a brain that has been impacted by abuse. And so areas of memory, learning, emotional regulation becomes less active and under chronic trauma. And this brain it's the brain's way of protecting itself, but can look like defiance, numbness, or confusion. Healing is possible. Safe relationships and support can help rewire the brain and build trust and a beautiful life for that person.
Yeah, so well said, Josie. And a quick mention on this, I felt like so many of our survivor thrivers talked about these instances that occurred in their life, and just a nod to adverse childhood experiences. I think many of us are familiar with those, but if you're not, feel free to Google them. And what I particularly appreciate is that within that Rise Center in California created an extended model of ACEs where it really shows the generational embodied and historical trauma, the social and contextual elements that exist even before the complex trauma occurs in the home. And then these are elements that will impact the survivor throughout their lifetime. But as Josie said, it's so important for the supportive services, the healing, the growth, the rewiring, because this is, even though the body keeps score, the score can be overridden. And that's a reality too. And so really making sure that we're equipping ourselves with the knowledge and resources and services to allow survivors to thrive.
Next is the barriers to disclosure or leaving. I just want to highlight that young people may not disclose their abuse or leave right away. I think I've shared this in many videos that I've done over the years. And, a question people always ask is, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just tell? And the truth is, I had developed a trauma bond, which means that, I cared and thought I loved this person. My brain was unable to see the difference. And so, the fear was constant. The fear of being harmed was, embedded in my nervous system. And so there was a deep deep distrust of systems and institutions as well. And so there's a series of reasons of why I did not disclose. There's a reason why survivors don't just leave. And so really, it's not about disclosure. It's about, our willingness as safety, healthy adults to create safety um, uh, and be patient with young people as they move through their emotions. It is only them that can move through them. We cannot force them to move through them.
Yes. Can you skip to the partnership with survivors?
Yeah, I was
Perfect. I love
I was
it.
in
Brilliant.
there. So this here is a slide that really shifts us from a victim-centered response and it starts at the first contact. It does not begin after disclosure. It begins at the moment you engage. Partnership really means that you do not make the decisions for the survivor. You make decisions with them. That includes involving them in the case planning, explaining options very clearly, and being transparent. Survivors are the expert in their own experiences. You may not understand that at first, but survivors are the experts. And so you may understand the systems, the policies, but they understand their trafficker. They understand the risk, and they understand what it feels to feel safe and what does not. And so really focusing on that is really priority. And so when survivors feel ownership over their goals, outcomes improve. And so this approach really moves us from that rescue to collaboration.
And with that, we are at time, but we want
We
to turn it
are.
back over to the CalTrin team and just say thank you all for joining with us today.
Yes, and you will have our resources here as well, available to you all in some of those publications that we mentioned.
I want to say on behalf of CalTrin, of course, and our participants, you can see in the comments and, the way that we expressed in webinars through emojis that the participants really, really appreciated this information, not just for knowledge, but for practical implementation. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing, and we hope to see you again.